94 dash, and you can look it up on the legislative website, Senate Bill 94, that was the legislative year, 940157. The Federal Mandates Act. The Federal Mandates Act was the first act in the United States to start the process of first auditing every federal program for its cost to the state budget versus what was being provided in federal monies, and to test the constitutionality of every one of those agencies and fiscal entanglements. Well, it was supposed to have a payoff in the year 2000. And guess what? The Republican-controlled House and Senate and Governor Owens, they suspended the rules in the year 2000 when they had to take the audit report and go to the Joint Budget Committee and begin the process of actually telling the federal government where to bugger off when it comes to these federal agencies and the spending and the mandates. And they repealed Senate Bill 157 very quietly by suspension of the rules, and the governor signed it. Governor Bill Owens. I didn't even find out about it for a year. And then all of a sudden I went, hey, wait a minute. They're supposed to be issuing the report, because this was 6 years ago and we were waiting for the whole process and been working through, and we got involved in other issues, and all of a sudden I go, wait a minute, what happened to Federal Mandates Act? It was supposed to be start executing and telling the feds what programs we were no longer going to support and what we get rid of. And I went back, and that's when I found that it had been quietly repealed with a suspension of the rules and didn't even exist anymore, because they couldn't come up and face the music. Well, we're using that now, and I've passed it out to legislators all over Montana and Idaho, and trying to get it re-going here in Colorado, but there just doesn't seem to be any interest in going that route again for some reason. But it still sits there, and it still could come up again, and we can, in the third go-around here, we can try one more time. But if we don't disentangle these agency interrelations and budget interrelationships, you know, we're gonna, when the federal Leviathan hits the beach, all the states that have done virtually nothing to disentangle themselves are going to get sucked right over the edge with them. And you know, to the maximum extent that any of these things can be successful. I mean, it was too late 10 years ago to be where we're at today. If we really wanted to, if we wanted to avoid all the bad consequences that could come out of what's coming. If we started 10 years ago, if we were at where we're at today in this movement 10 years ago, and could look ahead and actually start to see some real movement, we could have avoided the worst parts. We're not going to avoid the worst parts, but we still can, based on anything and everything that we can do within our local jurisdictions, we can try and protect the very localist of jurisdictions from the worst of it. But to the extent that the state hasn't moved and disentangled itself, in the counties and the cities and the schools, and there's a strong movement afoot right now, like I said, to disentangle school districts from federal funding, because they realize that the 7% budget they're accepting is costing a lot more in compliance costs, and they can actually get a net output in their budget, a net increase in their budget if they completely stopped accepting all federal monies. And if you look at the average school district of the 174 school districts, or I guess it's three less than that now, in Colorado, you'll find that they're pretty much, everybody's in the same boat. They receive anywhere from 3 to 7% of their funding, but 100% of the compliance costs. And that actually costs them more money than they receive from the feds and grants and direct payments. And if they got rid of it, they'd actually improve. And then they don't have any of the compliance issues either. They can tell them to go away. They don't have to comply, and they don't have to comply with any of this crap that they're trying right now. They have to be willing to give up that 3 to 5% and realize that they actually make money from doing it. But that takes an actual audit, and it takes people who understand economics sitting on the school board. So once we have some of these things under attack, we have control of our land, we've got a relative control of our monetary. At minimum, you have control of an economy, an independent economy that I talked about in the earlier slide, is one of the requirements of a free and independent state. If you can get some independent control of your economy, to have some control of your destiny, after you have your land, then you have a possibility of, and like in Idaho, it would be nothing for us in Idaho. You could wall off all the roads. We generate 95% of our own hydropower. We have probably an agricultural economic sector that's 3 times as big as Colorado's, because we have a lot more arable land, and we have a lot more water to irrigate with. I mean, that Snake River Plain is an enormous resource for agricultural farming. We have a very viable high-tech business. We have high amount of timber and minerals for extraction. We could have an independent economy that could operate very well, and with 1.5 million people. Okay, Colorado has plenty of energy resources. They have much more energy resources than we have to develop more of an energy economy within Colorado. You can, in the West, we have the best chance of surviving this with an actual viable economic system over a lot of other states. But, you know, the interesting thing is about 2/3 of all the states in the United States could be self-sustaining independent states on their own, completely on their own, because they have the people, the resources, and the economic sectors in which to provide it. But right now, they're under national thumb, and they don't understand how they can be free and independent states. So we have to the maximum extent possible. Where we are here. Oh, why do I keep doing the wrong way? So what does that? These are the things that actually encourage that to happen. But more so than that is this item right here. And this goes to issues of jurisdiction. Okay? You have to be able to know all this stuff that's going on. It's like everything we were doing in the 90s. Everything was a resolution, nothing was a bill. A resolution is basically a plea to please stop. You know, please stop interfering in the state of Colorado. That's what resolutions do. Bills are what put teeth. They enact law. And in the nullification, in the area of state powers and nullification, you have to be willing to exert the force of law against lawbreakers. And when those lawbreakers are federal officials, you have to define specific acts of the law breaking from the interference, and you have to be willing to carry forward with law enforcement on those agents that are breaking the law. That takes specific acts of nullification and interposition. Everybody understands the difference between nullification and interposition, right?
No.
Okay. Nullification is where there is a law set in place to stand between you and the federal government, and the state and the federal government. Interposition means it's what happened with the Real ID Act. Okay, they didn't specifically nullify the Real ID Act; they interposed. They just said we're not doing it, but they didn't have to do anything else. They just said we're not implementing it. Right? We're not implementing the Real ID Act. So they interposed themselves between you and the federal government, simply by saying, well, we're just not implementing. But they didn't have to do a specific act and criminalize any behavior on the part of federal officials to opt out of Real ID. Just said no. Opting out is another way to look at interposition. So if you have those two effective vehicles at your disposal, but again, this is the important word. Okay, what does willingness imply on the part of legislators? Cojones. Okay. All right, I don't know. We have to come up with a word for female legislators for some reason. I never quite feel comfortable with that one. That one doesn't fit. Right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, she's got no cojones. Well, of course not.
Maybe we'll say pechugas.
Okay.
Or brass.
Brass? That's a good one. But
How about just guts?
guts, yeah, we need guts
The old-fashioned
in
word
legislators. Right.
fortitude.
Fortitude. You know, and this is, they're all, I mean, you think about, it's just like what's going on in Congress right now with regard to impeachment of the president. My gosh, he long ago passed any historical requirements that he could have been impeached under articles of impeachment as a single Republican. Well, I think might be one now, who's tried to introduce articles of impeachment against the president? No. No fortitude.
Right.
Right? No fortitude, or no, you know, I mean, it's astounding, right? I mean, even against, you know, I mean, he's definitely, you could line him up there against, with Benghazi and some of the others, you could line him up against Nixon. I mean, you know, that one confuses the hell out of me. Just one small digression. I spent 3 years working around what are called flash and critic systems, which are the exact same system. They're just an updated version. Flash and critic systems are what controls messaging out of all military units, attachments, and State Department missions and diplomatic attachments. Flash and critic, that system 25 years ago was sophisticated enough to track on a millisecond by millisecond basis every single cable of communication that went between chief of mission or head of attachment and the Secretary of State and National Command Authority or the Defense Department. Flash and critic traffic is, they know exactly, and yet not one congressman is called for the disclosure of the flash and critic, and I know they exist. Not one congressman has publicly demanded the disclosure of the flash and critic traffic that came out of Libya and all the surrounding military commands and embassies. You have a millisecond by millisecond account chronologically of what everybody said, who said it, what orders were given, where they went to, and who got them, and when they were received. From the president on down, all flash and critic traffic is denoted exactly the instant in time when the president, every one of the cabinet officials involved, and everybody who is on that list for that particular type of message got the message and responded to it in any way. It's all documented. It's all there. There is no question that the entire record is there. Nobody, as a Republican, brought this up. They've talked all around it and never said it. Okay?
It's a cash cow, though. I still get the emails from the Tea Party saying, you know, we want to impeach Obama, send us some cash.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that all these things, when it comes to nullification, state powers, anything, the first thing is if we cannot get some local educated, I mean, and when it comes to state powers nullification, you realize that a lot of county commissioners can do a lot with ordinances to nullify, just as well as the legislature. They are a legislative body, and they have the same powers at the county level that the state legislators have to nullify at the state level. If the state doesn't do it, the county, I mean, there's no hierarchy of power and control here that says that if the state doesn't do it, when it comes to the Constitution, because it's the relationship's flowing, remember, the ordering of liberty, the relationship is flowing from us, the people, right on through the state into the federal and to the government, right? So if they're doing something that we don't like in the county, we, the people in the county, can nullify that act, and it carries all the force with it, but it's only within the county that an act of nullification can do at the state level, trying to nullify something statewide. Your county commissioners can do that in order to maintain a constitutional county. Okay? Again, the easiest thing is why, you know, and everybody goes, well, of course. But it all goes to understanding this ordering of liberty and who's in charge and believing that we are in charge. Yes, we are. And yes, we can.
Knowing we're in charge.
Knowing we're in charge, exactly. So, and that goes, you know, and that starts with knowing that the government is not the answer or the solution. It is the problem. And so to get the answer or the solution, we have to take control. And to help you, like I said, is that, it's really unfortunate, and I try everywhere I can. I think, actually, the meeting I'm having down in Cortez on Monday, they're telling me that they're gonna have all 3 of their county commissioners and 2 county sheriff candidates there.
And probably the DA of
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah.
district. I think Will be there.
Yeah, and a couple of representatives.
Yeah.
So I said, and this is extremely important. Like I told Pat, see, he can get a real leg up on his opponent if he comes to understand this as quickly as possible, because, and I defy when they come back, I'll take on any, you can put anybody. I've debated all up and down the chain from the governor on down. If you want to, if you think, once you understand the issue, and you take these people on in public, and all you have to do, like with county commissioners, Then you what, you go in and you best them a couple of times in public forum, public debate, they shut the hell up. And they start paying, and then they realize they got to go educate themselves. And guess what? The more they read, they don't come back with anything. The more they start reading, and they start agreeing, and then you win. It's all about education, and it's all about keeping the pressure on, and knowing who's in charge and why, and knowing the ordering of liberty. That's when you get to retake the rule of law over the rule of men and women. Again, that's how we get to win. So, you can take any area of state powers and nullification and dive down, we can talk about how, the specifics of how this is gonna get done. The question is not really about that, because that follows automatically. The question is how do we find the citizens, how do we find the candidates that are the ones that will actually carry forward those real acts of nullification at the city, county, and state level to make this happen. And to do the other things in conjunction through obtaining a constitutional sheriff to get those things accomplished. And that's how we establish, and that's how we get to understanding, again, when you're looking at all these different issues about what constitutes jurisdiction on these items and how how that plays into the equation. Yes.
In Mesa County and some of the other western Colorado counties, we've been passing resolutions on access to public lands, the RS 2477.
Right.
And so what you're saying is that instead of a resolution, that the county should pass an ordinance, and then that would have the force of law, and the sheriff would be obligated then to go open these things?
Yes, exactly.
Ha!
Exactly.
A resolution's just like a kind of, maybe we would do this someday.
It's a plea. A resolution is,
Okay.
well, when you take resolutions up in front of the part, what are you doing? Okay, we're asking you to, could you do this?
Pretty please.
Yeah, pretty please, could you do this? You have to stop requesting like they're in charge and, can you do this for me, please? And say, this is what you will do.
This is what
We
we're
are
doing.
directing you.
We did it.
This is what you'll do.
This is what we're doing. We
Right.
did it.
But
This is what we did.
the one thing in Nye County,
Uh-huh.
Nye County BUS, the one thing in that though, they talked about resolutions and ordinances. They did talk about that, the US or the district court, and they said that they have the same force and effect. So if in Nye County, Nevada is one case that all of our district attorneys are using to support the stance on jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, in that case, it does say the resolution and ordinance, they carry the same force and effect. And that's why the feds went in there. Now I realize, I know the jurisdiction issues from the state of Colorado, and it only went to federal district court. It didn't go up any higher than that because somebody died. But that is a case that they're using to say that, yeah, a resolution and an ordinance has the same force and effect as a bill or anything else does.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, that's fine, let's let them have that. But it also, what Scott McGinnis told us, he said that a resolution, what was it, a resolution doesn't have any it gives them the ability, our public officials,